Hey everybody, welcome to Improbable Wargaming. My name is Travis,
This is Steven.
and we have a very special guest today. Mr. Mike Porter has agreed to come and be berated by us with various questions that will all be extremely fair. I promise.
You promise? Yeah.
I, pro-
Okay. Good.
I promise.
100%. So why don't you start off with like a little brief intro of who you are? Not everybody knows, so let's start there.
Yeah. So my name's, as you so nicely said, Mike Porter. I'm currently on Team England. I've recently been over to the LVO competing in the ITC. Did pretty well. Played 40k for about 25 years, competitively for about 10. And yeah, big lover of the hobby. And glad to be with you guys, having a good chat.
Yeah, for sure. I'm glad you're here. I guess my big first question was, or is, so how do you feel? We'll just jump right into the meat of it, I guess, if you will. So we got nerfed. We know this with our 4-up to a 5-up.
Because Steven plays Harlequin.
And I want to talk
And
about
you
what I
play
care
Harlequin.
about first. So we're going to go there. So do you feel like Harlequins are still competitive? Do you still feel like they're worth playing? We'll go there.
Wow, yeah, straight in there. I love it. So what did Harlequins do well is the best question, I suppose, to ask. Originally, they score so well on the mission. They're fast, they can get objectives, they can take objectives. Their secondary game is incredibly strong, and they hit really hard. Okay. Now, obviously, before the nerfs, we were able to take a little bit more of a beating with a 4+ invulnerable save, which is great. So that's been hurt. No two ways about it. However, our ability to play the game, nothing has changed. And our ability to do damage with the nerfs to Armor of Contempt, the fact that we can hurt things, the kind of matchups that we didn't like have certainly sort of flipped a little bit. So they're going to be a harder army to play, definitely. But I do feel like they're actually in a better place now than they were before the nerfs overall.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as someone who's gotten to play them fresh from the book when it dropped to now, you definitely we got to go through lots of changes for sure. I still feel like they have a lot of play, like you're saying, and it's they're still fun. But yeah, like you said, you got to be a little bit more cognizant of where you're putting your models down, because you can't just weather the storm like you could before. Be like, oh, I have to make 12 saves, and somehow you'd make them all, and you'd be like, ha, and that's not happening anymore, for sure. So I agree with you there. I guess the other question I had for you was something I asked Jake from Vanguard Tactics, is how coming to LVO and playing here and then playing in Europe, how would you compare the two scenes, like competitive wise? Like, is it like you're a fish in water no matter what, or was it just a lot of changes or culturally or whatever?
That's a really good question. I've got to be careful how I answer it, because my experience of the American scene is Vegas, where we've got 1,000 people who are there for a whole myriad of different reasons. Some who just want to go and experience Vegas and be with the mates. Some who are at the absolute top end of competitive play. So I guess my sort of experience with the American meta is quite skewed. I've played Americans at WTC, who are obviously the best of the best, and then I've played everybody at LVO who can range from your casual player that you see in the UK scene to your top end player that you would see in the UK scene as well. So I suppose the best way to compare the two, from my experience, is I think the top end player is probably about a par with what I see over in England. But there is a much bigger bottom end who are there for casual reasons, only based on my experience of Vegas. But that middle section, whereas in England, everybody's got a really good list. Everybody has kind of got some experience of playing with it. There wasn't, from what I saw, that big of a spread over in the States. But again, that's a very limited experience for me.
So you heard it right here, folks. Mike Porter says that Americans have larger, bigger ends. Bottom ends. Larger bottom ends.
Larger bottom ends.
Larger bottom ends here in
You've
America.
got a larger bottom end. I was trying to be nice about it, but you've
Our
just,
bottoms
you've said
all the way.
it.
Perfect. Let me pass over a question to my buddy here, Travis.
Sure. So, Mike, you said you've been playing. You said you've been playing competitively for 25 years, or you've been playing competitively for 10 years. You've been playing for 25 years.
Yeah, about 10 years. I started off going to the home of Warhammer itself, Warhammer World, with some good mates of mine. And we'd travel down, we'd do the Throne of Skulls tournaments. We'd have a weekend at Warhammer World in Nottingham. Have such a great time. Yeah, we'd go there to try and do well, but the main thing was the social side of things.
Yeah.
But I really enjoyed the competitive side of it, whereas the lads I went with, they were more the social. That kind of sparked my interest in any tournament that I could find in the country, which at the time there wasn't many.
Yeah.
I would be like, right, I'd be on Daka looking for local tournaments, and I'd be there everyone that I could, just to go and experience that competitive buzz.
Yeah. So what is your story as far as like how did you get into the game initially, and how have you so you started 25 years ago, and then you started competitively 10 years ago. So there's a 15-year gap there where you weren't playing competitively, right? So how did you get started into the hobby, and how has that progressed to where you're at now?
So it was my big brother. He used to play historical war games with a group of his mates, and then they kind of picked up 40k alongside. Obviously, very very different back then as it is now. But yeah, I used to sort of look at them and be like, oh wow, these models look cool, this game was cool. They'd never let me play, because I was like, it's like, do one. And there used to be some funny smells coming from the room whilst they were playing as well, which is, at a young age I wasn't quite aware of it. I'm fully aware of what they were doing now. But it just looked like a great laugh, as well as the cool models and what was going on the table. Or sorry, a green felt mat on the floor.
There you go.
It just looked really cool, so that sort of piqued my interest. We picked up Blood Bowl, me and my brother, and we actually, he gave me the time of day. We actually played a few games there. Then we got a game called Space Crusade, which was Terminators and Tyranids on a Space Hulk, funnily enough. And we had, we used to have a right good laugh doing it. And then gradually I kind of introduced a few friends to it. They started to enjoy, and we just played casually, very much going around to each other's houses, sharing a few beers, playing a few games, just having fun. And then we started sort of hearing about these tournaments, which was when, the Warhammer world started. So yeah, I was very much a casual gamer. Loved the hobby, loved everything about the hobby, painting and building and whatever, and writing army lists and whatnot. And then obviously got into going to tournaments.
I got you. So that kind of leads into a question I have for you. So how long from you starting to compete did you feel like you really started separating yourself from the herd, if you will, and becoming a more of a top end player? How long do you feel like it took you?
Ooh, probably about 5 years. Probably about 5 years of just going and getting my backside kicked by some very, very good players and doing well at tournaments, going sort of 4-1, 3-2. But there'd always be that player that I'd just come up against and be like, whoa, what did you just do there? That's incredible. Talk me through that. This is high level gaming. And luckily, the people that I played against who impressed me and really sort of left a mark on me was they had the game of the time of day, and they taught me through it, and they said, they explained the sort of tactics and the reasoning behind it and how they approach games, and very much that sort of really did resonated with me. And I was looked into army list building first of all, more looked at the rules of different armies a lot more. I watched a lot of YouTube battles, which at the time was basically Frankie and Reese playing their absolute epic games on the FLGM, or just from my gaming, I suppose, back then. Just absorbing as much 40k as I could. And then the tournament scene started to pick up, and I started to get more and more of those top end games, and started to make friends with some of those players. And then my weekly games, instead of just being down at my mates having a slice of pizza and a beer or two, it was against really good players. And I started to learn how the game really worked, the intricacies of the game, and how to sort of leverage those little advantages. And that very much took off, and I started to develop a play style as well. I found an army that I really enjoyed using, that suited, the way I wanted to play the game, and was good at playing the game, which at the time was Space Marines of all things. And I just absorbed as much as I could, talked to as many people as I could, and really got that bug for playing competitively.
Great, yeah, great answer.
So I guess, going into that question, I was watching some of the LVO footage of you playing with Harlequins, and I thought it'd be a fun question. So, where you feel like you are, so we know where you are as a competitive player. We've got statistics for that. But where are you as an artist or a hobbyist side? Where do you feel like you are? Yeah, show us, please.
Visual thing. Here's my latest army. Here's one of my models.
Oh, he's jumping on the GSC bandwagon.
There you go.
Look at that.
That's finished. Okay.
And like I said, I've seen videos of your Harlequin, and even I'm not a great painter, but I was like, hey, I'm beating him somewhere.
My children painted those.
Well, that makes them more special, no matter what. I'm better than your 3-year-old. Dang it.
She's got time.
No, I'm just teasing, but cool. So, you got any other one for you? Ooh, we're having some fun upstairs.
My children are throwing a fit, apparently.
Speaking of children.
Hello. Gosh. So you play Harlequins now. You just revealed here live, folks, that you're getting into GSC. What other armies have you played over in the past? What one is your favorite?
Okay. Oh, good question. So for one of those questions, I've played pretty much everything. But I mentioned before, I learned a play style that I really enjoyed when I was starting to get into the hobby competitively in a serious way. I like really fast armies that are able to go anywhere on the board in different ways, be it movement, teleporting, reserves. I like armies with lots of tricks, and I like armies which score well and can play a game well, even if I've got a bad matchup. I know I can still score my points, stop you scoring points, and so on. So my main armies at the moment are Harlequins. Love the Harlequins. Thousand Suns, full of tricks. I'm just picking up Gene Stealer Cults because they look like so much fun to play first and foremost. And Demons as well. I've always had a soft spot for Demons. Again, looking at their rules at the moment, I think they're in a really good place. They look like they're able to do the kind of things that Harlequins used to do, but slightly differently. All the key elements of movement and scoring the mission, they tick all those boxes.
Nice. No, I do agree with you. As we already know that I'm a big fan of Harlequins. I got to play GSC for the first time ever at the one place I didn't want to play them, at LVO. And that was a tough lesson, but when I left that table, I was like, I want to own that army. That army was super fast, coming out of everywhere, playing tricks. It was easy to kill. By the time the game was over, they had like 4 models left, and I was still on the table, but they were able to constantly stop me from scoring. It was driving me crazy to the point where I fell in love with them.
Yeah, they can go one of two ways, I suppose. Yeah, I played them in a teams tournament in England, and I was playing Custodes when they first came out. So absolute power list. I was playing this Gene Stealer Cult. It was like, toughness 3. I absolutely wiped the floor with them. And by turn 5, I was going to lose the game. Just because of all the little tricks that they could pull off, and then all of a sudden, I did a few little different things, managed to win by 1 point. But I was very respectful of what the army could do in the hands of a good general and somebody who played them for a long time as well. So yeah, absolutely the same. I was like, these guys are great. I need to get an army, but they're not very cheap. So it's taken me a while to sort of gather the models to play. I've had a lot of borrow hammer as well in the last month. So yeah, the gratefulness. The games that I've played, I am loving them. Not as much as the Harleys, but they're a great army.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that I'm addicted to speed, and so for me, like I love Jakari.
In the game, not
yes,
the drug, folks.
Well, I
In
would have
the
said
game.
methamphetamine if we're going that route. But anyway, I love armies that go fast. So for me, like Jakari, Craft World, those feel good to me. Whenever I try to play an army that doesn't play at that, at a fast movement, I just feel like I can't do anything. Like, so do you feel like that's kind of like, what is it specifically about an army that, like you're saying tricks? So then is that what your ultimate choice is? So like you like armies that are tricksy versus fast, or you have multiple criteria that you're picking? Because I know you said points and tricksy is what I heard.
Yeah, speed as well. That's like the triangle. You know what I mean? That's if I can get all those three things, that's absolutely perfect. Which obviously Harlequins were. Oh, I mean, don't you? They were just great. It's like, yeah, I've lost all my models. I've still scored 97 points. It's fine, whatever. So that. Oh yeah, go on.
Well, I was gonna kind of go into the next part of that. So sorry for cutting you off there. So I guess my question is, like initially when the nerfs came and stuff, myself and my buddy here were thinking maybe light would kind of push out further from Twilight and stuff. But I don't know. I'm kind of leaning still into Twilight a bit for myself, just because they can they kind of carry that hammer around a little better than at least in melee than light. Do you feel like light is still kind of a better choice with the changes, or do you think that like Twilight is kind of still has play? What's your feelings on that?
I think there's choices. I think light overall still is better on the majority of terrain sets. In the majority of matchups, I think light still just edges it. Just that extra mobility and the fallback strat.
Yeah, that's
so good. However, Twilight. I mean, my last game in Vegas when I played John's Blood Angels.
Yep.
Oh God, if I had Twilight that game, that all of a sudden that would have changed that game completely with that particular terrain set on that mission. And that actually introduces quite a nice little element to a team building list as well with Harlequins. I do play a lot of teams games.
Yeah.
And I think if you've got a specific role with Harlequins and it is to go and counter another combat army, for example, then Twilight are still incredibly strong. But I do the practice games that I've done so far, the sort of the thinking behind the list that I've done so far, I think light is better for singles. Okay. But then there is a definite argument for Twilight.
Yeah, I think that touches on a good point that you made there of when you're building a list or when you're putting together an army to take to a tournament, of trying to think to yourself what are you most likely going to be going into, and what armies is your army going to struggle with, what are they not going to struggle with, and things like that. And so you mentioning that that last game against Blood Angels like would have been rather different had you been doing Twilight instead. How much do you factor in the probable meta into building a list versus just building a list that you are super confident with, that that you can score your points, that you can do your game, and other people will have to adapt to you?
Yeah, so I'll just use LVO as a really good sort of thinking behind that. When I went into LVO, I was battling for a week or two before of the list that I've played with 8 boats, 8 troops, the usual stuff. That was what I knew I was comfortable with. But then I also knew there would be a lot of really good players going with Thousand Suns. There was a lot of really good players going with Chaos Space Marine lists as well. And I knew this beforehand. And every sort of little tweak that I made to factor in Thousand Suns made the overall list a little bit weaker, but that particular matchup better. So it was really, really interesting actually, just to go through that process. It was drop a boat, take a solitaire, drop a troop, take an extra troop master, drop a Shadow Seer, take an extra troop. And it was very much warring with, there's 1,000 people here. My odds of playing a top player with the list I'm bothered about, how likely is that? Now, a lot of the testing that I did was on particular terrain sets. I hadn't seen the top table terrain. I had no idea it was that dense. Had I have known that was a thing and all of the top games would be played there, that would have then changed the list slightly as well. But I kind of ended up settling with 2 extra tech pieces, which were the extra Troop Master and the Shadow Seer for a specific matchup, which is about 200 points of my army. And I dropped a Shadow Seer and a boat, just based on the terrain and based on getting those things. And then I felt I needed for those matchups, which really helped. I ended up playing Thousand Suns against a top player in the round 6. And if I hadn't have had those tech pieces in, there's no way I would have won that game. So it ended up working out, but I could have very easily never played a Thousand Suns player and lost the game because I hadn't taken that list. So it's that battle of how much do you actually tech? And I felt 200 points worth of tech was about the right amount.
Yeah, it's not a huge investment, especially with, Harlequins can be very hoardy in a lot of ways. So, yeah, for sure. I mean, with my logic with LVO, I was like, I ended up just saying, you know what, I'm not going to be able to perfectly counter. At least I didn't think I could. So I ended up going with 9 boats, 9 troops, but only bringing 2 fusions, 2 kisses, the rest swords. And I brought 2 Shadow Seers, and I brought the sniper with the turn off Overwatch and set to defend, just so I could, because I knew there was going to be one problem. I was going to see flamers sooner or later, and I wanted to at least make sure flamers were going to be charged versus them just, overwatching me all day long. So that, I only went 4 and 2, not as well as yourself, but overall my list did pretty well. But I agree with you. It's hard when you're trying to, how much do you want to invest in what you're dealing with versus just having an overall, like take all comers list. So I definitely can appreciate that. So it can be really hard.
Yeah, and listening to other people, how they were writing their list, some people just went, this is what I know, I'm confident to go with it. And some people were teching just for those top tables, the terrain sets. So it's really interesting how it all works out, and how a lot of it's an element of luck, I suppose, who you're playing when. But it's nice seeing everybody's got a thought process for how they feel they're going to do the best. There's just different ways of doing it.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, that was what was interesting. Like with like Sean Naden, he was asked like what was the terrible matchup for his orc army, and he was like Tau. And then they're like, well, did you play Tau at all at LVO? And he's like, never saw them. So sometimes you get really amazing luck. You're like, okay, the worst list I could play never showed up for me. So that can also happen, right?
Yeah, I mean, I played Thousand Suns once. The best matchup for me, looking at my WTC scoring matrix, was Blood Angels, and that's the one that I lost to.
Yeah,
because the terrain just changed the whole game.
Yeah, you were saying in that matchup too that like he kind of like Jack kind of baited you out to the open. Is that what you were saying? Like you were trying to play your game and he kind of held back. Is that what I heard, or how did that kind of go wrong?
Yeah, it just, the way that you normally play against Blood Angels as a Harlequin player is you kind of throw the units that you need to score your maximum secondaries or high secondaries. You contest the primary game. And in theory, he's got to invest a 130 point unit to kill a 95 point boat.
Mm-hmm.
And you keep going like that for 2 turns. And then by turn 3, you've got the critical mass to then just go, boom, there's 5-6 boats. I'm going to delete enough to swing the game.
Mm-hmm.
But because I was unable to sort of chip away at units, because everything was hidden right on my deployment, right on the sort of midway point, I couldn't, I couldn't play my normal game, and I panicked a little bit, if anything. I was just like, oh gosh, I need to do these things differently. Whereas if I'd just calmed and just relaxed and just played the game that I knew I needed to play, but accepted that it was going to be a bit closer, I feel like I could have still sort of got the win, but I just panicked a turn too early
Yeah, and how much of you feel like that was being on a like in front of because you had cameras on you? So did you feel like being in front of the cameras affected you at all, or do you feel like it was purely because I know you were like listening to the interview a little bit. You were definitely doing the active math of okay, right now I think he's going to win by 3 if it keeps going this way. I'm going to hit the gas early versus were decisions being made while you're like, oh gosh, people are staring at me.
Yeah. Okay. The boring answer is
Oh, well,
one
here
of
you
the
go.
reasons. One of the things I was excited about with Vegas was there was a big Super Bowl or a big American football game or two on the Sunday. There was like the semi-finals, and I was desperate to watch them. And I just finished. I just finished a game with Brad, game one on the Sunday, and it finished quite quickly. Me and Brad had a great game. He's a great guy, Brad. And I had a little bit of time before the next round, so I was sort of wandering through the casino. Normally, between games, what I will do is I will sit and I will sit on my phone and I'll look at the mission, I'll look at the map, and I will have a game plan for how I'm going to play it. I made the mistake of going to one of the bars in the casino, and I ended up sitting with some hardcore American football fans. And I was like, I'm just gonna have a beer. I'm just gonna soak up the atmosphere, and then I'll go back and do my planning. And then before you know it, do you want a beer? Do you want a beer? Hey, America or England, you gotta love this. So I ended up having a few extra beers, and didn't have that time to just mentally set myself. And then by the time I got into the hall, I was all excited. And I was like, oh my gosh, what a game. This was, all pumped up for the American football. And I was like, oh, and now Warhammer.
I
I
love it.
think I wasn't quite in the right frame of mind. If I'd have just given myself that 10 minutes just to go, right, how's this different to how I would normally play this? I've got to be a bit more patient. It's still going to be fine. I just need to do the things I need to do. I'd have been okay. But I had a good time watching American football, so it's fine.
Yeah, I mean, you were what on game 9 or 8 at that point. After 3 days, you're probably pretty tired.
Yeah, it's 27 hours of Warhammer, and my games had gone. Most of them had gone pretty much to the wire. Especially my last two, my shadow round and my round 6. There was 3 points difference in total over both of those games. 2 points game 6, 1 point game 7. So it was like, whoa, tired. Didn't get a great night's sleep the night before. Then played Brad. Had a lovely game with Brad. But yeah, so I think tiredness definitely factored into it. But normally that doesn't bother me. I've been to Vegas once before and been tired and been fine.
Oh, sure.
I didn't feel like I made any mistakes. It was just there was a big shiny thing going on, and I was distracted.
Oh, no worries, no worries. So I've asked quite a few. I'll lend it over to you, my friend.
Oh yeah, well I don't have anything super special to ask. Are you how big are you into the lore of 40K?
Ooh, there we go.
Well, I absolutely love the lore. My reading skills aren't brilliant in that I tend to start reading a book. If I have time to read, it's at night time and I fall asleep incredibly quickly. It's a joke in my family. My children are constantly mocking me for it. But I've read like one book in about 10 years just because it takes me that long to do it. So I love the lore. I'm just not too knowledgeable about it. I love reading the little snippets in the codexes and things. But
I lean heavily on Audible, on audiobooks. Because
nice.
I can just listen to it, and there's a lot of other things that I have to do in my life that I can't just be reading a book while I'm doing, right? But while I'm commuting to work or while I'm painting or doing other things, you can listen to an audiobook. Yeah, that makes things a little bit more simple. So the amount that I have read of I'll put it in quotes because I have certain friends who don't believe audiobooks are reading. That's fair.
Yeah.
The amount that I've read of 40K has drastically gone up since starting to listen to audiobooks of it. So I'd recommend it. Give it a go because it's definitely helpful.
That sounds good. I did promise myself I'd get through the Horus Heresy series.
That is a commitment.
A lot of those books, but
that's a big commitment. That's a lot of books.
When I say the Horus Heresy, I mean the main things that matter.
The things that matter.
Yeah,
read that.
Yeah,
that sounds like heresy already.
Well, and
that's one of the great things about the Horus Heresy books is there's a few that are like chronological in order, right? and you're like, okay, I kind of want to grab these. Like the first like 3 or 4 of the series are kind of a continuation of the same storyline, or it's the same storyline in the same area. And then the rest of them are kind of just all over the place. Like they're like, oh, now we go to the Thousand Suns home planet, and you're like, it has nothing to do with what we're doing here, but like, it ties in somehow. Like, okay.
I know, but then so the danger with that is I read these books and I'm like, I need to start a new army because they seem really cool. I
that's definitely the point.
Got the money for that.
Yeah.
For sure. Well, I know we're getting closer and closer to wrap up time, so I guess my next kind of lead into that is, what are your big plans coming up? Like, are you going to be, because I know we were talking a little bit that I'm going to be in England at Warhammer Fest. Are you going to be there? And then of course my wife's going to make me send you a private message about something that you think we should do in Manchester, because she's coming with me and she's planned out 9 days of forced adventures. And then on top of that, like, yeah, what are your plans outside of that?
Yeah, what you got going on?
Well, first of all, February there is no 40k tournaments for me. I said after Vegas, I was just going to have some time off. And then when we get into March, it's very much gearing up to WTC. The England team, but I think we were a bit disappointed with how it finished last year, only finishing 5th, and we'd gone in hoping to win it. And one of the things that I felt we realised was how much preparation you have to put in there, how much hard work needs to go into testing your lists, testing your matchups, getting your matrix correct. So very much my focus is going to be on teams up until early August. I'll do the big events. I'll do Warhammer Fest. I'll do all of the UKTC big events. I'll do some smaller local events to try new list ideas out. I've just bought myself a laptop to play TTS. So that should be fun. I'm just going to apologise in advance to my early opponents who are trying to talk me through how to use a computer. It's going to be rough for them. But it's a crucial part of that practicing thing, and I've tried to avoid it for as long as possible. I tried it during lockdown, hated it, but now you listen to the Polish team and the American team, and they're spending dozens of hours a week just practicing lists, and that's what you've got to do. So so there'll be a fair bit of TTS going on. I'm starting a Warhammer club with the school that I've just started working at as well.
That's awesome.
Nice.
There was a lot of interest when I came back from Vegas. The children were like, well, what is this game? You're number 3 in the world. What's going on, Mr. Porter? This is great. So I'm going to strike while the iron's hot, set up a club there, and hopefully long term start a tournament circuit for younger children as a sort of gateway into the sort of adult competitive scene. Because I don't see too many young people coming through on the scene, and I certainly don't see many girls coming through on the scene. Yeah. So it's just trying to encourage as many people as possible to enjoy the hobby that certainly I love, and I've got an awful lot out of. Been all around the world with this hobby and had some great experiences. So it'd be nice to sort of pass that on.
Sounds
Absolutely
amazing. Well, thank you for taking some time out of your personal life to hang out with us on the stream. And it was really great meeting you. I'm really, as a Harlequin player, you're the pinnacle of where I want to be. And so I'm beyond happy to meet you, and can't wait to meet you in person in England, hopefully. And again, thanks for joining us. This is Steven.
My name is Travis, and that has been Mr. Mike Porter. Yeah.
Thank you, and see you next time.
Yeah. Thank you very much, man. Have a good one.
See you later.
Click the button. Where is it?
He's
there it is.